I want to talk about a documentary concept. I'll say concept because it's more than one program, known as Scared Straight. So basically, if you're not familiar with this, it goes back to a documentary film made in 1978, directed by Arnold Shapiro, narrated by Peter Falk, and it follows a group of juvenile offenders who were sent to the Rahway State Prison in New Jersey back in 1978, so we're talking some 42 years ago now. Um, and the concept was to get these young offenders meeting lifers, that is, serious criminals, murderers, and so on, serving their time at the Rahway State Prison. To scream at them, berate them, into the idea of scaring them straight, as with the title. Now, that documentary film, which I haven't seen in full, I was familiar with it, but I haven't seen it like from start to finish. Was critically acclaimed. It got the Academy Award for Best Documentary. Um, More recently, the concept has been broadcast on A&E. I don't know if that's a network or a sort of channel in its own right or what. I'm not really sure about that. But I've been watching a lot of clips of this in order to make this video. Um, I mean, there's a lot of clips available online, so you can really get an idea of what this is all about. Um, With the 1978 program, although it was critically acclaimed, its purported success was mixed. Incidentally, it was also the first documentary to issue the swear word fuck and shit on broadcast television on many networks. Most of the young offenders were from the tri state area, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. But basically, like I say, there was sort of mixed results from this. Many of the young juveniles involved in this didn't reoffend, but some did, and some even went on to be quite serious criminals. Um, so on the Wikipedia article, I'll just quote this verbatim briefly before talking about the more recent 2010s A&E series. In April 1978, James Finkenauer, a professor of the Rutgers School of Criminal Justice, began a test of the Scared Straight program using a control group, something that had not been done previously. His study concluded that children who attended Railway were more likely to commit crimes than those who did not. A meta-analysis of the results of a number of Scared Straight and similar programs found that they actively increased crime rates and led to higher reoffence rates compared to control groups that did not receive the intervention. The cause of the increase in crime is not clear. The UK College of Policing agrees that there is very strong quality evidence that Scared Straight programs cause an increase in crime. Two Justice Department officials have written an op-ed piece describing Scared Straight programs as not only ineffective, but as potentially harmful to the kids involved. The op-ed appears in the edition of February the 1st, 2011 of the Baltimore Sun, written by OJJDP, acting administrator. I don't know what those abbreviations are for. Jeff Slowakowski and Laurie O. Robinson. They say that when it comes to our children, policymakers and parents should follow evidence, not anecdote. In 2004, the Washington State Institute for Public Policy estimated that each dollar spent in Scared Straight programs incurred costs of $203.51. Um, and it's become quite a famous concept and been featured a lot in popular culture. Now, that very negative overview would appear to be contradicted by follow-ups in the A&E programs, which show that many of the young offenders do indeed change their ways. In one case, one particularly hard-headed guy actually came back to apologize to the officers involved. Now, I do think that the true test is over time rather than just in the following weeks or months. It takes time. I've kind of mixed views on this. I've watched a lot of it, and some of it is frankly quite horrendous. I mean, by the way, it features a lot of prisons. It's not just Railway Prison. There's prisons all over the country, all over the United States. There was even one episode where they had young offenders from the UK, including a young guy from London who was a mugger. It got them into the American program. We don't have such a concept here. Um, and maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. The thing about how successful they are, it is a matter of debate. Um, and I would have to see sort of some correlation as to why it's not successful, because that seems very strange. You would think that big time criminals yelling in the face of these young offenders, in some cases getting them to cry, that would put them off for life. So I would want to see what are the reasons why, in some cases, it wasn't successful. The caveat there, of course, is in many cases it has been successful. Um, so the more recent series, the 2010s series, the range of offences is quite broad. So you get kids in there, they range sort of from the youngest I've seen is sort of 12, 13. The older ones are up to 17, basically teenagers. Um, some of them are in for some pretty serious offences. There was one girl left another girl because it covers both sexes, left another girl in concussion. She spent 5 days in a juvenile offenders. That hadn't changed her attitude. There was several kids that beat up their own mothers, male offenders who beat up their own mothers. There was one kid who liked to throw stones at girls. There were several kids who wanted to be members of the Bloods and the Crips gangs, which of course are among the most famous gangs in the world, not just in the United States. Um, and some of the footage is quite shocking. I mean, the people they're confronting, or rather confronting them, don't mess around. These are dangerous, dangerous, big time criminals. People who are serving life sentences or lengthy sentences for armed robbery, for gang rape, double murders. These are dangerous criminals. Some of them are definitely psychopaths. Um, and, most of them, there's this thing where they get into the young offender's face and they really yell at them. Some of them are calm, and the calm ones are just as scary in some ways. Um, the bit that gets me a little bit uncertain about it as a concept, there's an aspect I do agree with, and I'll come to that in a second. But one thing I'm a little unsure of is that the background of some of the young offenders, what they're supposedly in for, can be contentious. So, for example, they may be in for fighting. Now, fighting to me could mean different things. It could mean a kid who has a temper problem just lashes out whenever they don't get their own way. But I wouldn't like to think that any of these young offenders are in for defending themselves, i.e., they were in a fight because they were defending themselves from bullies and they snapped once. There's also some kids who are in there for truancy and for drug offences and things like that. To me, they are. I'm not so sure that this sort of program is right for them. Then again, there are other kids who clearly have a serious attitude problem that's worse than that. They're violent. They are bullies. There was one boy who actually turned around to a girl on the program and said, "You're going to be raped first." This kid openly insulted his elderly grandmother. He was a piece of work. He really was. Um, and some of them go in with a real attitude of, "Oh, I can handle this. It's nothing." Some of them even mouth back to the inmates. Now, the important thing here is the guards are always there, so the inmates are not allowed to physically hurt them. I get the impression some of them would like to, because they really get in their face. But here's the thing, when you have teenagers who genuinely want to be a Bloods gang member or a Crips gang member, when you get kids who want to be gangbangers, bear in mind we're talking about gang rape here. I think that for those sort of young offenders, the idea of just getting them into some counseling or a juvenile facility for a few days, And I appreciate it's different in the United States than it is here. In the UK, they would be put on some sort of rehabilitation program. They'd maybe do a bit of community service. They'd have to go to some sort of counselling, but it would basically be a tap on the wrist. I've long felt that in recent decades, our criminal justice system for young offenders is excessively soft or excessively lenient, if I could put it that way. I mean, liberals watching this would have a complete heart attack. They'd say it's barbaric, it's child abuse. But let me just flip that over for a second. What if every technique has been tried with these young offenders? What if the counselling, the rehabilitation programs in the community, all those things have been tried, and these kids are just getting worse and worse and worse? So for those sort of kids, those who are bullies, those who are think it's cool to beat up girls, uh, these sort of kids are going to graduate to be more serious criminals. And I cannot deny when I see the really smug ones break down, it's quite satisfying because those kids are going to be a menace to society unless they are in such a position that they can change their lives around. And if that means being scared to the point of tears, being told to their face by dangerous criminals that doesn't you're not a big man by being a thug, by being a rapist, by beating up your mother or beating up girls or for girls, some of the girls are just as bad. They've just got an attitude issue as well. Lashing out at people because you disagree with them. I see this in the UK. We have a situation in this country where young offenders literally, I mean literally, laugh at the justice system because they take the attitude, and you can see it with some of these clips. Oh, well, I'm a young offender. There's nothing they can do. They'll just put me in juvie for a few weeks and that'll be fine. And I can hack that, so I can do this. I think there's a lot of factors at play. I reiterate what I said in the video about rap music and that whole culture. I think it's toxic. I think a lot of it today, and I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it today does glamorize that lifestyle. And I think American society also needs to reflect on itself. When you get like a brewery, there was actually a brewery, I believe it was in Washington State, that was actually promoting Bloods and Crips beer. I mean, there's no country on earth quite like the United States for turning criminals into celebrities and turning gangs into sort of, or certainly among developed countries. I mean, there's another caveat with all of this, of course, which is that the American justice system is hardly exemplary. I mean, it incarcerates more people than any other country in the world, and it doesn't, it's not a safe country. Most American cities are more dangerous than most European cities. America has a very serious problem, and that gang problem. I mean, some of those prisons are like jungles. They really are. The guards have control to a certain extent, insofar as they can make the inmates obey them, but they often, I don't want to say turn a blind eye to abuse, but they can't be everywhere at once. And some of the things that goes on in those prisons is barbaric, really is. But I am very much of the conservative philosophy of crime. That is to say, I think if you hurt society, you have to pay a price. So the thing about Scared Straight, the philosophy of it, I think is sound, but I think it needs to be its implementation needs to be very specific for the worst young offenders, and I'm not so sure I agree with it for kids who are maybe just being a bit mouthy or playing truant from school. Well, my question would be, well, why are they being bullied in school? So I'd like to see a bit more of the background for some of these cases. I mean, we talk about kids being disrespectful to their parents, but there is also abusive parents out there. So there's issues like this that need to be explored. But for those who, think it's fun to bully other kids, I mean, you see some of the participants of this program and you really think this kid really does need to be scared. put into a position where he's not cocky, he's not arrogant, where he knows that when he becomes an adult, that's going to be his life. And I do think that perhaps this sort of approach is the only thing that will change a kid like that. You know, the approach of rehabilitation and trying to encourage them to change their ways and the whole sort of liberal approach to that. What they need to understand is there are certain young offenders that literally laugh at that approach. So I think it should be a last resort. I also feel that some of it's played up a bit for the cameras. I imagine they have a strategy where they speak to the inmates to say, right, there's young offenders coming today. We're going to let you do this, but as soon as you cross the line, you get tasered. Um, Sometimes I feel that the officers definitely let it get pretty close to that red line. Um, Sometimes I think it goes a little bit far. But for me, the ones that are really arrogant, you know, that they, I remember one kid saying, hoes love it. He's talking about rape. He was actually trying to condone it. Now, a kid like that, I say kid, really, he's a young man because 16, you know, what's he going to be like at 25 if he doesn't change that mentality? So I think for the bullies among them, bullies only understand one language and they have to be scared in order to change. It's the only way. They need to be brought down to earth. The important thing about this that needs to be understood, it's very psychological. There's no physical abuse. So not once will you see an inmate like physically beat up any of the young offenders. They wouldn't be allowed to. Sure, they get in their face and it can be quite pretty shocking stuff. But before liberals outright dismiss it, I think there needs to be a sort of case by case analysis of this. And I would say that liberals also need to consider that when every approach has been tried, then as a last resort, is it really the worst thing? Showing these kids what their life could be? Surely that's tough love. You know, surely that is more practical than just trying to go softly, softly and hope that they change. Because there is an almost manipulative instinct with that sort of young offender where they think, well, I'm being treated in a lenient way, so I'll get away with it. You know, I take the view that if an offender doesn't, no deterrent, then they'll just keep doing what they're doing. So the fundamental principle of Scared Straight is deterrence. Of course, there is those situations where participants in it have went on to become offenders. That certainly needs to be explored. We need to know the reasons for that. Is it a result of the program, or is it that there wasn't things done in other aspects of their life? I'm not sure that it could be a knee-jerk response of blaming the program. I don't know. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Just to be clear here, I'm not saying the American justice system is exemplary. Far from it. Very far from it. There's certain things that go on in the American justice system. Sort of normalization of, I mean, there were some clips, for example, showing guards. Perhaps the most shocking one I saw was this kid. He looked like just a little boy. He looked like a little black Harry Potter, put it that way. He wanted to be a Crip gang member. He looked like nothing. He didn't even look like a thug. He just looked like a scared little boy. Anyway, one of the inmates took his glasses. The officers then yelled at him, "Who took your glasses?" The inmate behind the officers saying, "Snitches die." The kid was terrified. He was crying his eyes out. And it was quite horrendous to watch because he was in a no-win position. You know, he says who done it, then they threaten to kill him. If he doesn't say who done it, then oh, you're going to this prison. Now, that may be a case where they went a bit far. I don't know, but the aftermath video showed that the kid started respecting his mother and he vowed to get away from his interest in gangs. And the thing is, this little boy was like, he just didn't look scary at all. He didn't look like, you get some young offenders who are dangerous. This kid just looked like a child. He really didn't look like. Anyway, it's certainly a controversial thing. Um, I mean, in a country like Sweden, it would be absolutely illegal. It would be considered pure child abuse. But different countries do have different contexts, and the sort of problems that the United States faces, when they do have rampant problems with street gangs. Um, I mean, you have gang problems within the prison system. So the underlying initiative should be keeping young offenders away from street gangs outside and inside. Let me know your thoughts. I personally don't think it's black and white. I think there's pros and cons. I'm not entirely against it. I think for the worst young offenders, I mean, I know, for example, of young offenders in this country who really are utterly, utterly callous towards their victims. And when liberals on the left treat them like, oh, well, they're too young to know any better, when they take away that sort of responsibility, I mean, when they take away any sense of consequence, to me, all that does is send out the message it's okay to continue behaving the way you're behaving. If there's no deterrent, if there's no fear factor there, I do believe we need a situation where offenders fear justice. And the problem in this country is young offenders just don't. I mean, those drill gangs that are roaming around London, maybe not so much now, but they don't fear prison. They don't fear the system. So maybe the system needs to be more scary, short of human rights abuse. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts.